I was born into what you might call a proper family, though nowadays I have a very different view of what that word means. My parents were the kind of people who lived their lives by an exhaustive set of rules about respectability. Every gesture, every word, every choice of clothing had to meet their exacting standards of what they called decent behavior. My sister Emma was their perfect child. She knew how to play their game flawlessly, always saying the right things, wearing the right clothes, dating the right boys from the right families. She'd nod along with every one of Mom and Dad's opinions, help organize their church meetings, and basically be the daughter they always dreamed of having. I saw through it all pretty early on. You see, our house was like a theater where my parents were the lead actors, putting on the performance of their lives. In public, they were these upstanding pillars of the community, Dad with his perfectly knotted tie and Mom with her carefully curated church outfits. They'd go to every community event, donate to all the right charities, and make sure everyone saw them doing it. But the moment their audience left, the masks would come off. Our living room would transform into what I privately called the gossip chamber. Mom's friends would come over for coffee, and that's when the real show would begin. Did you see what the Hendersons were wearing to church? Mom would start, stirring her coffee with perfectly practiced disdain. And their daughter, running around in those shorts. Someone needs to teach that family about modesty. Dad wasn't any better. He'd join in with comments about people's jobs, their cars, their houses, always with that subtle edge of judgment wrapped in fake concern. Poor Bill Johnson, trying to keep up appearances with that new car. Everyone knows his business is struggling. The biggest target of their criticism, though, was my Aunt Claire, Dad's sister. She was everything they weren't, and I loved her for it. She worked as an actress, had actual success on theater stages and in musicals, and lived life on her own terms. When she visited, it was like someone had finally opened a window in our stuffy house, letting in fresh air and color. Aunt Claire always brought gifts when she visited, thoughtful things that showed she actually paid attention to what people liked. Mom and Dad would accept them with their practiced smiles and proper thank yous. But the moment her car left our driveway, the real opinions would start flowing. "Can you believe she's still dating around at her age?" Mom would say, making air quotes with her fingers. "Living in sin, that's what it is. No husband, no children, what kind of life is that for a woman?" "And these gifts," Dad would chime in, holding up whatever lovely thing Aunt Claire had brought. "You'd think with all that theater money, she could afford something better. But no, she's too busy spending it all on herself." They'd go on and on about how much money she must be making from her shows, how she could afford designer clothes but brought them cheap presents, how she was setting a bad example by choosing career over family. It was like they had a catalog of criticisms, just waiting to be unleashed the moment she left. I was 7 when everything changed. It was one of those typical afternoons at our house. Mom was hosting her weekly tea with her gossip circle. I was playing with my dolls in the corner of the living room, supposedly out of earshot, when I heard them talking about Aunt Claire again. "She's nothing but a loose woman," Mom said in that whispered tone she used for her nastiest comments. Her friends all nodded knowingly, making little shocked sounds while clearly enjoying every moment. I sat there with my doll frozen in my hands, puzzling over those words. I'd heard them call Aunt Claire many things before, but this was new. The way they said it made it sound awful, but I couldn't figure out why. It bothered me for weeks. When Aunt Claire came for her next visit, I waited until we were alone in the kitchen. She was helping me reach the cookie jar on the top shelf, just like always. "Aunt Claire," I said, fiddling with my cookie, "what's a loose woman?" "That's what Mom and her friends call you when you're not here." The cookie jar nearly slipped from her hands. She set it down carefully, but I could see her hands shaking. Her face went through several emotions at once: hurt, shock, and then something I'd never seen on her before, pure anger. "Jessie, honey," she said softly, "you stay right here." She marched into the living room where my parents were sitting. I followed quietly and watched from the doorway. "I put up with a lot from you too," she said, her voice trembling. "I've ignored the snide comments, the judgments, the constant criticism of my life choices. But this? Calling me names behind my back? How dare you, Mom started to say, but Aunt Claire cut her off. Don't bother denying it. I've heard about the things you say when I'm not here. You two are nothing but selfish hypocrites. You smile to my face, take my gifts, and then trash me the moment I leave. I'm done with your two-faced behavior, done with your gossip, done with all of it. She walked out that day and never came back. The door slammed so hard the family photos rattled on the walls. Years passed. My sister Emma married right after high school, to Jason, the son of Mom and Dad's best friends. It was exactly the kind of proper, respectable marriage my parents loved. They started pushing me down the same path before my senior year even started. We found the perfect boy for you, Mom announced one evening. Richard Thompson, you remember the Thompsons, right? Such a respectable family. But I want to go to college, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I've been researching programs. College? Dad scoffed. What for? Richard is going to take over his father's business. He needs a supportive wife, not some career woman. They arranged a meeting, of course. Richard turned out to be exactly what I expected, perfectly proper, perfectly boring, and perfectly wrong for me. But I saw the look in my parents' eyes and knew they wouldn't let this go. So I smiled and agreed to date him, all while secretly applying for college scholarships. Graduation day started like a dream. I'd made it, top of my class, scholarship secured, though my parents didn't know that yet, and a whole future ahead of me. We had a party at Richard's house after the ceremony, with most of our class there. The music was loud, people were celebrating, and for once, everything felt perfect. Until it wasn't. I went upstairs to use the bathroom and opened the wrong door. There was Richard, in bed with my friend Kelly. My graduation cap slipped from my hands and hit the floor. The sound made them both look up. Jess, Richard scrambled to cover himself. This isn't, I mean. Save it, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. We're done. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. My phone started buzzing immediately, Richard's calls, Kelly's texts, but I ignored them all. I knew the real storm would hit when my parents found out. What do you mean you broke up with Richard? Mom shrieked the next morning. Over one little mistake? Little mistake? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was in bed with my friend. These things happen, Dad said, like he was explaining something to a child. Men have needs. A good wife learns to look the other way sometimes. Are you seriously telling me to just accept that he cheated on me? The Thompsons are our closest friends, Mom hissed. Do you want to bring shame to this family? You're airing our dirty laundry in public. That was it. Something in me snapped. Shame? You want to talk about shame? I laughed. All you care about is what other people think. You sit here in your perfect house, judging everyone else, gossiping about them behind their backs. You're nothing but hypocrites. Mom stepped forward, her voice ice cold. You will apologize to Richard. You will marry him, or we will disown you. I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment I'd been preparing for. Actually, I won't, I said. I got a full scholarship to State University. I'm leaving for college in August. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's face went white. Dad's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Get out, Dad roared. If you want to throw away everything we've planned for you, then get out of this house. You're no daughter of mine. I walked up to my room, grabbed the bag I'd already packed, just in case something like this happened, and walked out the front door. Behind me, I could hear Mom crying dramatically and Dad slamming things around. My hands were shaking as I dialed Aunt Claire's number. I hadn't spoken to her in years, though I'd kept her number saved all this time. She answered on the third ring. Hello? Aunt Claire? It's Jessica. There was a pause, then her voice softened. Jessie? Sweetheart, what's wrong? I told her everything: Richard's cheating, my parents' reaction, the scholarship, being kicked out. The words tumbled out between sobs I hadn't even realized I was holding back. "Where are you right now?" she asked when I finished. "Standing outside their house." "Stay there. I'm coming to get you. It's about an hour drive." True to her word, exactly 1 hour later, her red convertible pulled up to the curb. She jumped out and hugged me tight, not caring that my tears were staining her silk blouse. Aunt Claire's house in the neighboring town was exactly like her, bright, welcoming, and full of personality. Theater posters lined the walls, and comfortable furniture invited you to sit and stay a while. It was everything our sterile family home wasn't. "Make yourself at home," she said, showing me to the guest room. "This is your space now, for as long as you need it." That night, over cups of hot chocolate, with extra marshmallows, I told her the whole story in detail. She listened without interrupting, only nodding occasionally. "You know what," she said when I finished. "You remind me of myself at your age. Standing up to them, choosing your own path. I'm proud of you, Jessie." "Really? You don't think I'm being selfish?" "Selfish?" she laughed. "Honey, living your life according to someone else's script, that's not being selfless, that's being a puppet. You need to write your own story." The weeks before college started were some of the best of my life. Aunt Claire helped me set up my laptop and taught me how to find freelance writing gigs online. "Everyone needs content these days," she said. "Might as well make some money while you wait for school to start." Between writing articles about everything from pet care to travel tips, we'd spend evenings watching old musicals or reading scripts together. She'd tell me stories about her theater days, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I could just be myself. When August came, Aunt Claire drove me to college herself. She helped me carry boxes up to my dorm room, arranged my desk just right, and made my bed with the new sheet she'd bought me. "Now remember," she said before leaving, "this is your adventure. Make it count." I threw myself into my business management classes, determined to make her proud. We talked almost every day. She wanted to hear everything about my classes, my roommates, my life. My parents and Emma? Radio silence. Though Aunt Claire would sometimes mention things she'd heard through the grapevine. "Your sister had another baby," she told me during one of our weekly calls. "Her third. They named him Jason Jr." I just shook my head and changed the subject to my upcoming midterms. Emma had chosen her path, just like I'd chosen mine. Some days I wondered if she was truly happy playing the perfect daughter, wife, and mother, or if she ever wanted something more. After graduation, accepting the management position in Aunt Claire's city felt natural. We'd grown so close over the years that I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. The company was great, my career was taking off, and most importantly, I got to spend almost every weekend with Aunt Claire. We'd do Sunday brunches where she'd tell me stories about her latest theater projects. She was directing community plays now, passing on her passion to a new generation. Sometimes we'd spend whole weekends binge-watching old movies or trying to recreate fancy recipes we'd seen on cooking shows. Then came the diagnosis. Stage 4, she told me one Sunday morning, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug. "They say I have a few months, maybe less." I moved in with her that day. Between work and taking care of her, the days blurred together. We made the most of every moment. She insisted on teaching me her secret recipes, told me stories about her youth, and made me promise to keep living boldly. She slipped away on a quiet Tuesday morning, holding my hand. The theater community showed up in force for her funeral: actors, directors, students from her workshops. The church was packed with people whose lives she'd touched. But the 3 empty seats in the front row spoke volumes. My parents and sister hadn't come, even though I'd sent them the information. A week after the funeral, the notary called me to his office. "Your aunt was very specific about her wishes," he said, sliding documents across his desk. "The house, her land back in your hometown, and her savings, approximately $700,000, everything goes to you." I sat there stunned, tears rolling down my cheeks. It was too much. All I wanted was my aunt back. That weekend, I started going through her things. In her home office, tucked away in a drawer, I found a bundle of letters, all addressed to my father. None of them had been sent. With trembling hands, I opened the most recent one. Dear John, I know we haven't spoken in years. The doctors say I don't have much time left, and I find myself thinking about family. About reconciliation. Remember when we were kids, and you used to protect me from the neighborhood bullies? I miss my big brother. I know we've chosen different paths, lived different lives. Maybe we've both been too stubborn. But life is too short for pride, isn't it? I hope someday you can understand that I loved you all, even when we disagreed. Even when it hurt. Your sister, Claire. The letter was dated just 2 weeks before she died. She never sent it. Never got to make that final attempt at peace. I folded the letters carefully and put them back in the drawer. Dad hadn't even come to say goodbye to his own sister. He'd chosen his pride over family one last time. Life has a way of moving forward, whether you're ready or not. 2 years after Aunt Claire's death, I was still living in her house, my house now, and throwing myself into my work. The promotion to senior manager came with a corner office and a salary that would have made my younger self-size pop. Then one day, my phone rang. Mom's number flashed on the screen, the first time I'd seen it in years. My hand hovered over the decline button, but something made me answer. Jessica? Mom's voice sounded smaller than I remembered. We need to see you. Can you come? I found myself driving back to my childhood home that weekend. The sight of it stopped me cold. The once pristine house was falling apart, paint peeling, gutters sagging, the perfect lawn now overgrown with weeds. This wasn't the showcase home I remembered. Inside was worse. The furniture was worn, the carpets threadbare. And there sat my family, Mom looking tired and gray, Dad with defeat written across his face, and Emma huddled on the couch with 3 kids clinging to her. Her eye was bruised, poorly hidden under makeup. Jason turned violent, Emma whispered, not meeting my eyes. I had nowhere else to go. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jason, the son of their perfect friends, the respectable match they'd arranged for Emma, had shown his true colors. We were wrong, Jessica, Mom said, tears in her eyes. About everything. About forcing you to be with Richard, about college, about you. Dad nodded, though it clearly pained him to admit it. We shouldn't have tried to force either of you into those marriages. Look where our precious reputation got us, I can barely keep the lights on. They explained how Dad's business had failed, how their friends had abandoned them when times got tough, how they couldn't even afford to fix the leaking roof. I wrote them a check for $10,000 right there. For repairs, I said. No strings attached. After that, I started visiting regularly, always bringing something, groceries, clothes for the kids, new appliances when the old ones broke down. My parents were grateful, perhaps truly. I tried not to question it too deeply. But one night, looking at Aunt Claire's photo on my mantel, I made a decision. The land she'd left me in my hometown was just sitting there, unused. I contacted an architect the next day. I need a house, I told her. Something big enough for a multi-generational family. 4 bedrooms minimum, plenty of play space for kids, a proper kitchen for family meals. The plans she drew up were perfect, a modern home with everything my family needed. I hired the construction crew that week, swearing them to secrecy. Every time I visited my parents, I could see the old house crumbling more, and I'd smile to myself, knowing what was being built just across town. As the new house took shape over the months, something else was taking shape too, a pattern I should have recognized sooner. What started as genuine gratitude from my parents slowly morphed into expectation, then entitlement. The first shift was subtle. Instead of thank yous for whatever I brought, I started getting comments like, "Oh, we were hoping for the other brand," or "We really needed something else instead." Then came the direct requests. Mom would call with shopping lists, not even bothering to phrase them as questions anymore. We need a new washing machine. The one at Sears is on sale. Can you pick it up this weekend? Dad joined in too. Your sister's kids need new school clothes. The good stuff, not the cheap things from the discount store. The requests grew bigger, more frequent, more demanding. A new TV, because the old one wasn't smart enough. A complete set of patio furniture because what will people think of our backyard? Kitchen renovations, because the counters were embarrassingly outdated. Then came the call about their 35th wedding anniversary. They were planning a big celebration at Le Maison, the fanciest restaurant in town. All their old friends were invited, the ones who'd supposedly abandoned them in their time of need, but were now back in the picture. I thought it would be the perfect occasion to surprise them with the house. The construction was complete, the interior decorated, everything ready for them to move in. But a week before the party, Mom called. Jessica, she said, not bothering with hello, your father and I have been talking. For our anniversary, we need a new car. It's $60,000. Excuse me? I nearly dropped my coffee mug. Well, we can't keep driving that old Toyota. What will people think? And you're doing so well now, surely you can afford it. Mom, I already have a gift planned for you and Dad. What could be more important than this? Her voice turned sharp. We're your parents. We sacrificed everything for you. The least you can do is make sure we have a decent car. Le Maison was exactly the kind of place my parents loved, all crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths, perfect for showing off to their social circle. I walked in carrying the house documents in a silver gift envelope, my heart racing with anticipation despite the tension from Mom's recent demand. The celebration was already in full swing. I spotted them immediately, Mom in a new dress, probably bought with my money, Dad beaming at their gathered friends, Emma sitting quietly with her children. The old crowd was all there, the same people who'd supposedly abandoned them during their hard times. Mom saw me first. Instead of the usual fake smile, her face hardened. She whispered something to Dad, who turned to look at me with equal disdain. Well, Mom's voice carried across the restaurant, deliberately loud enough for everyone to hear. Look who decided to show up. I froze halfway to their table, suddenly aware that every eye in the place was on me. Mom, Don't mom me, she cut me off, standing up. How dare you come here after refusing to help your own parents? After we sacrificed everything for you? Dad joined in, his face red. We only asked for one thing, one simple thing to make your mother happy on our anniversary. But you're too selfish, aren't you? Too busy counting your money to care about your family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The room started spinning slightly. Is this how you raised your daughter? One of their friends asked, clearly enjoying the drama. To disrespect her parents like this? She's no daughter of mine, Mom announced to the room. A real daughter would have bought her parents the car they needed. Instead, she comes here empty-handed to ruin our celebration. Empty-handed? I finally found my voice. My hands were shaking as I pulled out the envelope. You want to know why I didn't buy you that car? We don't want to hear your excuses, Mom snapped. Just leave. You're embarrassing us in front of our friends. I looked around the room, at their smug friends, at my sister who wouldn't meet my eyes, at my parents who looked more concerned about their reputation than anything else. In that moment, I saw Aunt Claire standing in our living room all those years ago, facing the same judgment, the same cruelty. I spent the last year building you a house, I said, my voice clear and steady. A beautiful, 5-bedroom home on Aunt Claire's land. Space for everyone, you, Dad, Emma, the kids. I was going to surprise you today. The color drained from their faces. Mom's mouth opened and closed without sound. But now I see that Aunt Claire was right about you both. You haven't changed at all. You're still the same selfish, image-obsessed hypocrites who care more about showing off to your friends than actually being decent people. I held up the envelope, then slowly tore it in half. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence. The house is mine now. And so is my life. I'm done trying to buy your love. Jessica, wait, Dad started. No, I cut him off. I watched you drive Aunt Claire away with your cruelty. I watched you try to force me and Emma into loveless marriages, because you cared more about appearances than our happiness. And now I've watched you try to humiliate me in public, because I wouldn't buy you an expensive car. I'm done watching. I dropped the torn envelope on their table. Happy anniversary. I hope your reputation keeps you warm at night. I walked out with my head high, ignoring their calls behind me. My phone started ringing before I even reached my car. Then the texts started coming, Mom, Dad, Emma, even their friends, all suddenly realizing what they'd lost. I blocked them all. I never saw my parents again. I heard things through the grapevine sometimes, about how they lost their house, about Emma struggling to raise her kids alone, about their friends abandoning them again when the money ran out. But those weren't my stories anymore.